It looked like at least 5 or 6 flashlights were shining at us from the trees. This story begins when I was a child, probably about 7 years old. My mom always threw huge Halloween parties for all the kids in the family. I think there was about 16 of us at the time, ranging in age from about 5 to 13. It was awesome, but the coolest part of the parties always came when it got really dark out. We would all take a hayride to a cemetery a few miles down the road from where the party was being held at. My mom would tell us about some of the people buried there and how some of them were not resting in peace. Typical urban legend stuff, you know. When we got there, the adults said that they wanted to show us the grave of an old man whose ghost was seeking revenge for his wrongful death. We were all scared and excited, creeping through the cemetery in the dark towards the largest tombstone. When we got about halfway there, my dad and uncles popped up from behind a grave and were wearing scary masks. The kids all ran away screaming for the wagon, while the ghosts and Mom laughed. For years, the adults retold this story over and over, laughing over all the details of our panicked faces and terrified attempts to get away. Fast forward a couple years, and we're all teenagers now. That's when we decide, me, my sister, and 2 of our cousins are gonna get our family back for that prank. Our parents got together once a month to play cards, so that October, we made sure that we were around for that card night. We waited until our fathers went out for a beer run, which inevitably meant that they would be out for a couple hours at the bar. We told our moms about a legend we heard about a sad ghost that could be seen weeping at her husband's grave. We made this story up, but it was convincing, and we asked them to take us to go see the ghost. My cousin had secretly called his best friend, who had agreed to go there in a mask and hide and scare them. It was really similar to the one that they did to us when we were kids, but it worked. It went perfectly, actually, and our mothers nearly peed themselves. We all laughed about it as we went back to the car. That's when things started getting a little strange. When we got to the car, it wouldn't start. We joked about it, saying the ghost must be sabotaging us, and decided to walk to where my cousin's friend had parked his car. Of course, my cousin's car wouldn't start either. We started to feel a little weird about this, as neither car had any problems recently. This was before everybody had cell phones, so we started to walk towards the closest house, which was about a mile or 2 away. Though none of us knew them particularly well, we did know the family name of the people who lived in that house. As we went up their long driveway, we started to worry because there was no cars parked at the house, and it looked pretty dark inside. We knocked on the door anyways, but we got no answer. We were about to leave, not having nearly as much fun as we thought we would, when we heard voices coming from the back of the house. We went to their backyard, looking for the people we heard, but it was also pretty dark, and nobody was around. We started calling out a couple times, even identifying ourselves, but we got no answer. Their backyard had a fair amount of trees, and suddenly, a large branch fell down off one of them. This scared us because it didn't seem like there was an apparent cause for it. And then, in just a few seconds, at least a dozen branches, bigger than the last one, fell from 5 or 6 trees closest to us. That's when we started to hear footsteps and whispering coming from the woods. Needless to say, we ran for it. When we were near the end of the driveway, my cousin screamed and pointed back towards the house. It looked like at least 5 or 6 flashlights were shining at us from the trees. We ran straight back to our car, tried it again, and it started no problem. We didn't bother going back to my cousin's friend's car. We just went right back to the house. Later that night, my uncle, dad, and cousin took his friend back to his car, which also started on the first try. When they went to go pick up the car, they drove by the house that we stopped at, and everything looked completely normal. There was even a car in the driveway now. We've never been too sure if the people in that house saw us goofing around in the cemetery and decided to play a prank on the pranksters. Maybe it was something else. If it was a prank, they put it together awfully fast and never confessed to it later. We always felt too foolish to ask. Alright, I'll preface this one by saying it's loosely a Halloween story. It involves a Halloween costume, and it takes place on Halloween. Kind of. So, anyways. When I was 6 years old, I got appendicitis. I had it for a while, but each time my mother took me to the doctor, he just said that it was a really bad stomach ache. He told my mother that if it really was appendicitis, I wouldn't be able to do the things that I was doing because I would be in so much pain. He was wrong, however, and I guess I was misdiagnosed because my appendix just wasn't in the right place. A few days later, and it's a fine Tuesday afternoon. I was at my babysitter's house while my parents were at work, and that's when my appendix burst. I remember screaming from the pain, throwing up all over the place on the side of the couch, and eventually fainting in a pool of my own vomit. I was told an ambulance was called, and I was rushed to the hospital. I vaguely remember bits and pieces here and there, and every time I would come to, I would see this older guy I've never seen before. He stuck around for a while, and I seemed to be the only person who could see him. I can vividly remember what he looked like. He had a big, unruly beard that was very salt and peppery. He had slick, dark black hair and dark eyes. He wore a blank, black Henley t-shirt with a faded leather jacket, tight jeans, and a beat-up pair of Converse. I remember that the look in his eyes was one of melancholy and understanding. But at the time, I could only call it sad, the way adults look at kids when they're hurt or upset. I only ever saw him a few times. I saw him in the ambulance. I saw him in the hospital in what I can only assume was the ICU. And I saw him a few times in my room when I came out of surgery. He didn't say anything most of the time I saw him, and I thoroughly remember him shaking his head a few times, chuckling to himself. The last time I saw him, I woke up in the middle of the night and saw that he was by my bed, staring at my mom. As I looked at him, he turned to me and said the only thing he ever said to me. "This sucks, I know. Sorry, kid." Shortly after that, I discovered the movie and book The Outsiders, and I became obsessed with greasers. I wrote short stories, essays, and so on about that era. But as I grew older, I began to lose interest, but I never forgot that guy. One Halloween, a couple of years ago, I decided to dress up in random things that I had around the house. I was trying to be a greaser. This would have been about 20 years later after I initially saw that man. At the time, I also had a bet going on about growing out my beard, so I didn't shave either. I did my best to recreate the look of a greaser, and I asked my wife if I looked like one. She told me that I looked like a combination of a biker and a greaser because of the beard, but the leather jacket and greased back hair were perfect. I then went to a full-length mirror in my father-in-law's bedroom to check everything out, and there it was. a slightly younger version of the man I saw when I was 6. The biggest difference? My beard wasn't salt and pepper. I was in complete shock. My wife came over and asked me what was wrong. She said I looked like I'd seen a ghost. Go figure. As the years went by since that Halloween, I've gotten rid of that jacket, and I don't wear Converse all that much anymore. I pluck the white hairs out of my beard, because if I don't, I look more and more like that man. I have no idea what the hell's going on, or why this is even happening. My wife tells me not to worry, that everyone grays. I haven't even told her about the man, because it sounds nuts. Update. I've decided to discuss this part of my life with my wife. She was confused at first, asking me questions along the lines of, "Are you sure no one else saw this guy? Could it have been a random bystander who happened to see that you were in pain?" I explained to her everything the best I could, and it took about 4 hours to get to the end. Now she's actually insanely curious about who it could have been. Was the person real and just being ignored? Could it have been myself or somebody else from an alternate universe? Could it have been an alien or some higher plane being that's seen the future and knew that I would be in pain? All kinds of weird stuff. She's actually way more interested than scared. She says she wants answers and has been reading random books to catch some insight into what it could have been. Not really sure what I was scared about in telling her my story, but now she wants to talk about it all the time. It seems like she's found her newest hobby. Hey guys, scary stories here. I think that's part 3 for the Halloween videos. I hope you've been enjoying them. I think there's another couple coming up, and then maybe on Halloween itself, we'll do something special. Maybe like a compilation or something like that. Anyways, I hope you're taking care of yourself, and I hope you're treating yourself well. If you liked the video, give it a like. If you disliked it, give it a dislike. And I'll see you on the next one. Bye for now.